So a while ago I uploaded a video titled, I accidentally threw away a baby crested gecko. The title was true. If you want to watch that story, feel free to go see that video. But if not, a quick recap. I take in animals and occasionally breed them, but it's really not a priority. We've sold some axolotls that were bred and tried a couple gecko pairs, but it's not really a big deal if they don't work out. They're kind of just for fun to see what happens. And some crested geckos, they mated a few times and they even produced some eggs, but for some reason the first few eggs ended up being duds. It laid one more egg. I figured I'd put it in the little incubator, which is basically room temperature, so it's just a container with humidity, to see if it would hatch. And of course, it did not. I just tossed the container. But then I realized we might actually want that container, so I decided to retrieve it from the trash and discovered that under the paper towel, there was actually a hatched crested gecko. That was the moment I was terrified and realized I almost caused the demise of a couple-day-old animal that had no idea what was coming to it. But it was still alive and okay. And he's right here. He's a huge pain to handle, so I don't want to try and film while handling him, but I've got tons of clips to show you of him because he was running around this room. So I'm going to update you on the cresty and talk about my experiences with the baby geckos and how it's different. So the baby gecko care is a bit more different than I expected. We don't get young animals very often because when people send me pets, normally they've at least had them for a few years, so they're subadults or adults, because most reptiles reach sexual maturity pretty quickly. Crested gecko is the same. It doesn't take too long. But for some reason, they're the one species that I've gotten a lot of babies rehomed to me from. Maybe people were breeding and they couldn't get rid of the babies. Maybe they accidentally bred them because they do kind of just reproduce. But for whatever reason, I've been given like 7 or 8 baby crested geckos. However, I made a mistake with one of these very first baby geckos that I didn't even think about, which ultimately ended up killing it. Basically, the closest comparison I can make is think of an infant human baby where you give them harder mattresses so that they don't roll over and suffocate, because an older kid or an adult is gonna realize, oh, I'm not breathing, wake itself up and be able to easily roll over. The baby, however, might not be able to and can suffocate. And so that's just kind of one of those little things that I never really thought about with crested geckos and the substrate. They are a lot clumsier, and when they're eating, they might have trouble. They have some massive heads, okay, and they might have trouble finding the food, and they tend to just kind of chomp around at things and learning the environment around them. And it looks like one of these baby cresties did just that when it was going for the food bowl, but it missed and got a mouthful of substrate and actually ended up suffocating on the substrate, and it blocked its airways. I found it dead soon after, and that really sucked because it was like totally 100% my fault. That was my 2 bad baby crested gecko experiences, is one suffocated on substrate and the other one got thrown in the trash. But I promise this is not a usual thing. All the other baby cresties did wonderfully. The far majority of animals do well, but there are those few stories that stand out where it was either a human error or a fluke. Both of these were just my human error. That was years ago, and now I pretty much only use paper towel with the baby cresties. And same with pretty much any other gecko. I try and not use any loose substrate until they're a bit older. So when this thing was a hatchling, it was just on paper towel. But now that it's a bit bigger, it seems safe and comfortable to use a loose substrate. He's gotten a lot better at eating, and it really is not a concern. And it probably is very unlikely for a cresty to munch a bunch of substrate and not be able to get it out of its mouth. So technically you probably could use a loose substrate with the brand new, just hatched babies, but I don't like to risk it myself. So it's those little things that I don't really expect. Then there are some more obvious care differences, like they're smaller so they can fit through smaller cracks and gaps. This most often happens with people's brand new baby corn snakes or mostly corn snakes. I mean, I'm sure others as well, but baby corn snakes, they're just so thin and they can squeeze their bodies even more. So people say, well, it turns out that it slipped out of its enclosure without me realizing, and they're certainly hard to find. That's why I'm really careful if we do ship a baby corn, really make sure that there are no gaps, because even the super secure looking enclosures sometimes have little holes just next to the latches, and I'm just using a little Exoterra with this cresty, and the holes are way too small for a crested gecko, but it's something to keep in mind that even just an air gap could have probably fit this baby crested gecko through it, and I doubt I would have ever seen it again. Luckily, it's been secure, and those are definitely the 2 largest things. A few other things I'm conscious about is say feeding the babies, because even if it looks like the food was eaten, maybe they just licked it and realized they don't like it, and they're actually not getting that much nutrients. So it's just the little things, making sure that they are eating, and being a lot more conscious, similar to a human baby as it grows. As a baby, you're gonna give it, I guess, more attention than an older baby, than a non-baby, because it can fend for itself a little bit more, and you just gotta be on top of things. And it's interesting how that translates over into the pet and reptile world as well. Baby Cresty, even though I'm not actually the one doing its care, he looks great. And he is super pretty. That's the other thing. Crested gecko morphs, I know a few by name. Harlequin, Fire, Spotted. I don't know much about gecko morphs, but I think this one actually is one of the coolest looking that I've seen. I know they can come in all sorts of varieties, and this probably isn't the most rare morph by any means, but even when this Cresty is not fired up, meaning that it basically has bolder, higher contrast colors, maybe when it's upset or stressed out or whatever, even when it's not fired up, it's still extremely pretty and always has some super dark blacks and some surprisingly bright reds on its back. So it is neat to look at. I look at it for 5 seconds, I'm like, wow, that's neat. And then I'm satisfied. I just got satisfaction from a crested gecko. Pretty cool. His head is still massive compared to the rest of his body. Hopefully he'll sort that out and start growing into it soon, because he'd look really stupid if that stayed the same as an adult. But it's growing pretty quickly, and that video was quite a few months ago, and there's been a big size difference, like probably over double, something like that, which is quite impressive for a short period of time to double your size. I know lots of reptiles grow really fast, but it's really cool to see it from day 1, or maybe 2, depending on how long it was in that tub, to now, of just the size difference. When it comes to breeding, so I'll admit, it's a bit hard for me to get satisfaction out of seeing animals being bred, because I just know there's so many crested geckos out there that probably are waiting for new homes. So crested gecko breeding is definitely not something I want to do more of or planning on. If there's a couple cool pairs that come in, maybe it's worth it, because I do know that the babies will sell. We won't end up with a bunch that won't have homes like some people do that then have to give it to us. And of course, more expensive morphs means more revenue. And I like revenue because you can turn it into expenses, and expenses let you do things. Money. It's great. Yeah, seriously, like when we sell more expensive morphs, that opens up more resources to do other projects. Like say the piebald ball python that just sold on the site, I think it was like 600 bucks. Yeah, that's a lot of money from one snake. But then there's also another animal that I just spent like 500 on vet bills on, which I'll be doing a video on, so it all evens out. So I could see where breeding is sometimes not a bad idea, even for us to do here, because that revenue really helps with the sicker animals and the other projects and stuff. So I'm not never gonna breed necessarily, I'm not always gonna breed, but we have this baby Cresty here who I have been secretly calling Dumpling because I thought that was the funniest name recommendation. A lot of you just said trash or trash can. That doesn't make any sense, but Dumpling is actually just a cute name, aside from the fact that he almost ended up in the dump. So Dumpling's doing well. He's not a big fan of handling, which is why I just don't feel like filming and handling him at the same time. And he's very skittish. That's the other thing about babies that I meant to mention. They tend to just be more skittish. They're more likely to get eaten. They've got to be more on edge. I assume it's just some sort of biological thing that I was taught in school but wasn't listening about, where they have to be a lot more careful and a lot more defensive as a baby, so that it's more likely they can grow old and sexually reproduce, or in the case here, not get bred, because we don't need any more crested geckos. But that is him, and some of the interesting things I've realized, and that experience with the baby Cresty that sadly died just from being on what I thought would be a perfectly fine substrate. It's not the substrate's fault, it's not the gecko's fault, it's just my fault for thinking that it would be okay on it, and now I know, and I would highly recommend to keep loose substrates away until it's at least a few months old, whether it's a baby Cresty or, I don't know, other animals that are on cocoa fiber. But that's it. If you want to check out the, part 1 of this video, then you can do so, and maybe I'll do another update on them. Let me know if you want to see more of Dumpling. I don't know. I feel like the common sense law is whoever raises the animal gets to name it. I didn't raise this animal. He's just been one room over while I'm filming, being raised by Alice, but I'm calling him Dumpling. Thank you, Dumpling. Very cool. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.